song planned, but Spotify froze up on me, so we are going to wing it and dive right into the story already, and hopefully that loads up before the end, because I really want to play that song for you guys. I feel like there's a lot behind it. But anyways, if I'm being brutally honest with you guys, I've been on a really weird mind space as of lately, where just I feel like I'm working really hard and nothing's really happening. And sometimes I put it on that I'm not working hard enough, and it drives me further, and it just gets real mixed up, and I feel like I can't get my answers. I feel like sometimes I don't have that same connection. Like, it's just like sometimes I lose sight of what it's all about, and that it's about that one person. And sometimes I lose sight of that, and I feel like we all do sometimes. I get so I was actually opening up to some of my friends, like my close friend group. Uh, as of recently, they invited me to a Bible study at a church, not a brand new church, but a church I've never been to before, south of Mobile in Theodore. And I've never been to this church, never been around these group of people or anything. But I went with my friends. I was open. I was actually off work, and I just went for it. And wanted to hear something new from new people, right? And ended up it was we discussed First Kings, which is what we're gonna dive into in the story of the Lilly workers. And it was just exactly what I needed to hear. That I had been focused too much on the recognition of people and what the numbers say, and I lost sight of what this is all about, and working for the glory of God and His kingdom, and others and brothers and sisters who are out there and lost, who are hurting, who are depressed, who are struggling with drugs, who are just lost in culture and the world and what Satan and the enemies have told them, and told them who they are, and that's what it's about. That it's not about being recognized. It's not about seeing the numbers. I mean, I can sit here and I can't tell you how many times I've been heartbroken when I see how many people are on the stream, and I watch the number go down, and it just hurts. And my argument has always been, well, I'm missing out on that one person when that one person leaves the stream. Well, God would tell me that you might have lost one, but there's plenty more that are still here and listening. And it's about the recognition from me, Matt, not the people. And so anyways, at this Bible study, he just dove into exactly what I needed to hear at the moment, and it was the story of the Lilly workers. And I called this today "Be a Lilly Worker," and we're gonna dive into First Kings, chapter 7, and that's where this story starts. And it's gonna be really short. It's not gonna be long at all. It will be a really short message. I just feel this story hit me really hard, and I feel like it needs to be passed on to you guys. And then after this, I actually just want to play another worship song and just let God speak. And hopefully this speaks to you on some point, some level, like it did for me. But anyways, be a Lilly worker. We're diving into First Kings chapter 7, and Kings is all about the kings who have ruled Israel. And we're diving into chapter 7, where King Solomon was the ruler of Israel at the time, and he comes in after a long line of kings that have just failed Israel and just ran Israel into the ground, and it hasn't become a prosperous nation. Well, Solomon tries to seek wisdom from God and wants to do something great for God and His glory, and try to turn this thing around and be the king that turns Israel around and stops running it into the ground and running away from God. So he decides to build this huge temple for God's glory, for people to come worship God. It's going to be this great, magnificent temple that is actually modeled after the Garden of Eden. Um, the kind of motto slang where heaven and earth meet and God is present. So he's going to build this huge temple, right? Modeled after the Garden of Eden for God. In fact, in the First Kings chapters 5 through 8, we're diving into 7, but 5 through 8 are all about going into the detail of the construction of this temple. Like, monstrous temple, lots of details to go over, so much so that it takes that many chapters to dive into it. Well, so anyways, like, this temple is big, elaborate. It's got gold and jewels everywhere. But the defining pieces of this temple that made it what it was the two pillars at the entrance of this temple. And so you've got this gorgeous temple, right? But you've got these two massive pillars that are in the entrance. Well, what 1 Kings chapter 7 dives into is the construction of these pillars and the attention to detail that went into the top of the pillars. So when they were building the columns to Solomon's temple, chapter 7 dives into the detailed attention that was given to the top of the pillars. It stresses that as much detailed attention was given to the top of the pillars as to the bottom. And maybe you're saying, Matt, why is that significant? No duh that they paid attention to the top as much as the bottom. Well, think about it. It's a huge temple. The entrance is massive. These pillars are massive. The word said that believe they were around 40 feet tall. So that's a tall, really tall pillar. So think about this. When people are coming into the entrance, nobody's ever going to see the top of that pillar. Nobody's ever going to climb the 40 feet to see what's up there. Nobody ever even probably looks up. How often do you find yourself looking at ceilings of places going, wow, that's a cool looking ceiling? Not often. You don't really look up. But the workers paid as much attention to the little details that would never be seen by human eyes. And they etched these beautiful lilies, very elaborate lilies, into the top of the pillars. And that's why it's called being a lily worker. Because they weren't doing the work for the people, for recognition of people. They weren't doing that elaborate work of lilies for people to compliment them on. It was for God. It was for God's glory. That this temple was going to be for God. And no matter what, even the parts that I know human eyes will never see, I will give everything I have because it is for God's glory. And I'm going to make this beautiful. No matter, completely unseen by human eyes, they still did it for God. And I had to ask myself this question, and maybe you need to ask yourself this question as well. How often have you found yourself slacking off in your work for God due to the fact that nobody's going to see it? How many times have you had situations come up and you've gone a route or you've picked a way because you know people are going to see that? I'm going to get recognition for that. People are going to compliment me on that. And I found myself in that. I had to be honest with myself and say that I was slipping up and I was going down that route. And maybe you're finding yourself on that route. We're called to be lily workers. That we don't work for the recognition of people. We work for the recognition of God. See, this got brought up too in that Bible study, and it hit me hard too. There's a difference in having ability and having effort. We all have the ability. We all have the ability to go out and do great work for God. But do you have the effort? Are you putting in the effort for God's glory? Not your own glory, not the recognition of people glory, but for God's glory. We all have the effort. We all have the ability. But are you putting in the effort? Be a Lilly worker. Be willing to do your works in secret. Those constructors of the pillars, they worked in secret knowing that nobody would ever see those lilies, but that God would. That God would recognize their hard work because he could see them. See, I think sometimes this next saying gets thrown off. And I think we give the enemy and the devil too much credit for stuff. I know it's a popular saying, the devil is in the details, right? I disagree. I think God is in the details. I think when you pay attention to the little details and you don't let that slip, and you do it for God and not yourself or your recognition, I think that can sometimes be the most rewarding things that happen in your life. And I think it becomes the biggest doors that God can walk through into your life. I think God is in the details. And we shouldn't seek recognition from anything other than our God, our Father, from Him, from His glory, His kingdom, not the world's, not your friends, not your families. Be willing to do your work in secret for God, with God. I'm going to just leave you with this quote. And the guy that was giving the Bible study said this. And I immediately thought of you guys. And I thought of Midnight Church. And just how true it is. And what we can do here. He said, to keep me going, to remind myself, to be my anchor in my work and in my daily activities. I constantly tell myself this to keep me driven, to keep me going, no matter how much or how little I'm recognized by other people for what I do. He says, I know what I am capable of, and to give God anything less is a sin to me. And man, that's so true. We all have the ability. We all are capable of great works, not for us, but for God. And to do anything less than our absolute best for Him should be seen as a sin in our eyes, that we're falling short. I think of Midnight Church when that's said. Not as a person, but as a church. As a church, I know what we are capable of. I know what we can do. You know how we proved that again and again. In one of our very first services, we had over 20 people commit their lives to Christ. And our first ever legacy giving, we raised over $500 to help a family out. Last week, we raised almost $100 to help a church out. I hear story after story after story of how Midnight Church is saving lives, helping people out, mending broken relationships and broken homes, helping people turn to Christ, helping people learn about Christ and dive deeper into their relationship that they already had. We know what we are capable of, and to do anything less, we should see as a sin in our eyes. Be a Lilly worker. Work for God's recognition, not people's recognition. I'm going to pray us out, and I'm going to play one more worship song. And this is a worship song that it's meant to be a prayer. So it's going to be a prayer for you, for me, for our church, that we continue to go out and we complete the mission of God. And that is simply fish for people. Be a Lilly worker, work in secret, work for God's recognition and not this world's. Father God, thank you for tonight. Thank you for this word. Thank you for the lessons that you've brought down on us. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for the strength. Thank you for helping me get this message out. God, I'm praying for each and every individual that can hear my voice right now, for just safety and an open heart, that they learn how to love, they learn how to be joyful, they learn how to forgive themselves, forgive others, and choose light in a dark world. God, I'm praying for more Lilly workers, for your kingdom, for your glory, for your recognition. All of this I pray in your name. Amen. Alright guys, one more worship song.